Quite possibly after electrostatic discharge, how you install your CPU cooler is the most controversial, opinionated part of building a computer. We're going to unbox this Arctic Freeze 2, one of the highest rated all-in-one liquid coolers that you can get for your CPU. This is Project SeVeN, a long-form look at how to build your own gaming computer or how to adjust the components inside of your case today. If you are interested in performance gaming content like this, go ahead and click that like button, maybe even consider subscribing. For more information, check out TheGrayingTech.com, where I have build, blogs, and behind the scenes photos of all of this process. Okay, so this is the Arctic right here. We are simply going to unbox just like that. Not really a big deal. Inside here we have a box of accessories. We have the actual portion that goes on the CPU right here. These are tubes and there is a cable for the pump right there. Then this is our actual radiator and fan solution right here. There's a QR code for the online manual. This is where you will go in order to get the information on how to mount this to your motherboard and to your case. Toss that down for now. Let's take a look at the componentry here. Okay. We have, yep, there's another QR code for it. And a little booklet, okay? Yep. So you have to go online in order to get the instructions. Not too uncommon these days. This is a backplate. Given the structure, this is a backplate for an Intel processor. So that is going to go behind our motherboard. Then we have lots of screws. We have standoffs here. These standoffs are designed to keep the mount, the portion that goes on the CPU, from going too far down. Sometimes you will need these for different sized chips. This allows Arctic to basically sell this kit and have it work with multiple processors, so you don't have to get a specialized version. It's quite convenient in that regard. These are washers, so these are going to help separate the mounts and the screws from the motherboard itself. This provides just an extra layer of protection. This is Arctic MX4. This is a very well-rated thermal paste solution. This is going to go in between the metal plate that I'll show you on the cooler itself and the integrated heat spreader, the metal part on top of your CPU. This right here is critical in ensuring that you have a perfect uniform connection between the CPU and your thermal solution. These are different brackets. So these brackets either go on an AMD processor or those will go on the actual mount itself. We have lots of different screws and different things that we're going to use to assemble. We have additional brackets here. Now, given the height here, you see the difference here? Given the height, that tells me that this is probably what you would use to mount to an AMD processor. And then this is what we're going to use to mount to an Intel processor. So that's how that's going to work out. And then you have these right here. These screws are what you're going to use to actually attach the radiator assembly to the case itself. So we're going to set these aside because we're not immediately going to work on that. So here we have some different physical washers. These kind of screws right here, okay? They have a more aggressive bite to them. And these are what are used to mount the fans to either your case itself or to something else. So these right here we might not necessarily use because the orientation that I'm going to talk here a bit, we're going to have the radiator flush against the top of the case. These are standoffs. Just like there are standoffs for your motherboard, you're going to have standoffs for the actual mount itself. And the different size standoffs are for different CPUs. Some CPUs have a higher integrated heat spreader. So we have lots of different componentry here, and that's where the online guide is going to be necessary so that you identify exactly the parts that you need to use in order to install for your specific CPU and sometimes even your specific kind of motherboard. So that is our hardware. Let's take a look at the cooling solution itself. Now I keep using this term cooling solution. This is all one cooler. This is going to work together. That's the importance of an AIO, all in one. This is going to work together. It's designed to be easily installed. It is also designed to work without you ever needing to do additional maintenance to it. It's sealed. You don't have to do anything with these other than clean the fans and clean the radiator if you are using this as an intake. If you're using this as an exhaust, there really shouldn't be dust and buildup inside of here as long as you've kept those microfilters in place on your intake. Now, Arctic has a very interesting design on their actual cooler. There is a patent out there from Acetec that a lot of the AIOs actually use. Arctic designed their own, and it specifically deals with the location of the pump itself being down on the heat spreader instead of as part of the tubing. That's the difference between these. Arctic also has an integrated fan right here that helps blow on your VRM. Remember, your VRM and this thermal solution are going to help cool your CPU and allow you to have good overclocking performance. By having an additional fan blowing through your VRM heat sinks, this is going to allow you to achieve higher overclocking scores and more sustainable overclocking performance. So this actually is a wonderful design, and it really works. This right here, this is what's going to touch your actual CPU, and note there's a sticker on this. Unfortunately, I have to say, a lot of times on PC Master Race and Build a PC and other places, people forget to remove this sticker. You do remove it last. So I understand why people would forget it, but just don't, okay? These are very poor thermal conductors. Doesn't matter how much thermal paste and how great your thermal paste is. If you leave this sticker on, you're going to get severely limited temperatures. Can't stress that enough. This right here is a 4-pin connector. So we're going to have to find a specific spot on the motherboard to plug this in, and this is going to allow us to adjust the pressure flow of the water that's in these tubes and in the radiators itself. This is also going to power that fan and the pump assembly as well. Here you can see braided rubber tubes. This is all pre-assembled. You don't have to do anything with this. Here we have the Arctic. Here you have the Arctic fans. These are 140 millimeters. That's this distance right here. This is going to give us great thermal performance in a very small package, which is why I went with the 140s. You'll note here, the fans are pre-assembled. So all of this is pre-wired up so that you don't have to worry about trying to find a place to plug in and do all of that other stuff. You're essentially just attaching one cable right here. And if you feel around, you can actually sometimes feel the wire. It's right here. But that's fine. Once this is in your case, you'll never even notice the wires there. But it's very convenient just to have this one cable to connect instead of having to route all of this and trying to make it pretty. The controversy. Okay. Steve at Gamers Nexus talked about this. What you want to try to avoid is getting air in the pump itself. So depending upon the orientation of the radiator, if you position your pump so that there is a chance that an air bubble will come up to the top of the radiator, and then ultimately that air bubble will interfere because it'll flow into the pump, that's what you're trying to avoid. So ultimately, this is the recommended avoid position. This position's okay. This position's okay. Avoid this position. Now, I'll see if you can hear it. Hear the water? There is a thermal solution inside of here that is coolant. Again, you don't have to worry about maintenance or anything. These are designed to be self-contained. Don't try to unscrew anything. You don't have to. Now on this portion of the radiator, you will see fins. Now these fins are what actually provide the cooling. You're gonna have tubes running in between this portion of the radiator. The air is going to move through these fins. That is going to actually cool the liquid that is inside, and that's what cools your entire loop here. So you wanna make sure that you are at least a little bit delicate with these fins. You don't want to break too many of them. If one is broken, that's fine. It's not the end of the day. If you have a giant dent in there, that's problematic. That's what you want to avoid. Okay, at this point, we are ready to mount the backplate itself to the motherboard, and then we will go ahead and prepare the brackets for the pump so that we have everything aligned, and then we'll talk about thermal paste. Okay, in this instance, we are going to attach these plates just like that. This is the screw that they recommend using. Okay, so it mounts just like that. Now, let me stress one thing. It's okay to look at the manual. It's okay to look at the videos, the instructions, and all of that stuff. Don't try to just wing this stuff on your own. Okay, once you get to a certain point, you're gonna have most of this memorized, but even still, it helps to understand and look at the manual because not every piece of hardware is the same. Not every kit is the same. Okay, so there we go. We have this portion now ready to be mounted down onto this right here. And in between is going to be the CPU and is going to be the motherboard. And so that's why we need to mount this backplate to the motherboard itself. So let's go ahead and get the case out. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is we are going to use these rubber discs, if you will, and that's going to help protect the back side of our motherboard. We will do the same thing on the other side as well. So we'll get these in place, and then we will slide this bracket through the motherboard, through the holes. It's also pre-cut. There are certain portions of this backplate that's been pre-cut so that this is able to kind of fit right in between there for a nice snug fit. Now you don't have to do these perfectly, you're just trying to get them in place. Okay, and these are the little cutouts that I was mentioning before. So that's how we know how to position the backplate itself, just like that. And then this portion here is going to poke through the motherboard itself. Give it a little bit of a shimmy and a little bit of a push. You're hearing it popping, that's good. That's what you want to hear from a sound standpoint. So you can see how the cutouts and the surface mounted devices on the back of the socket itself are all properly cut out. Nice, smooth, good looking finish. That's exactly what you want. And then our final part here, we are going to use these longer standoffs. If I get it in focus. There we go. These longer standoffs as opposed to the shorter ones right here. Now there's only a little bit of a difference, but that little bit of a difference can significantly impact what's actually occurring when that heat spreader and the heatsink come into contact. So we are just going to finger tighten these. They are omnidirectional, meaning it doesn't matter which side you're actually screwing down. They're both designed to work both ways. Okay, so I screwed in the lower right all the way, and now I'm screwing in the other three. This was mainly just to hold the bracket in place. And then when I do my final kind of tightening, I will use the cross method that I pretty much use for everything. Okay, so we're going to tighten this one first. I'm also pushing on the back plate in the back. Then we'll go to the next one here. And finally, the upper corner. Okay, so now our back plate, and I'm just checking no looseness, everything is good and in place.
If you enjoy gaming performance content, consider clicking that like button, maybe even subscribing. If you're already a subscriber, please visit patreon.com/TheGrayingTech to learn how you can help me pay it forward.
Okay, let's go ahead and get this laying down. So here you can see the standoffs, and here you can see the integrated heat spreader. The technique that I use for applying paste, that's the stage that we're at, I do an X with 4 dots surrounding that X. I have found pretty consistently that that gives me great thermal coverage with the paste, and I don't have to worry about overdoing or underdoing. There are opinions aplenty on thermal paste. There are different kinds of thermal paste. In this instance, I know this Arctic does extremely well. It is not the highest possible tier, but for this system, we're not necessarily going all out. We're not expecting to really overclock this CPU to its highest possible levels. We just want great performance, not the absolute top best performance. All stop. Now, for those who might be wondering, I am grounding myself right here. I'm actually just connecting to the PSU on the back side here. All right, we are at the stage of the game where we remove the sticker. Try not to touch the copper. Try not to touch the integrated heat spreader, especially now that we have our paste down on top of it. I'm going to pre-adjust how the wire goes, and then I'm trying to get everything oriented the way that I'm going to end up installing this. So we're going to go like this. See how the radiator is going to sit up here at the top? The fan for the VRM is going to be right here, and that's what's going to blow. So this is how we're going to orient everything and get basically things lined up. Get your cable out of the way. Okay, so it just slides down on top of those holes. And then to actually secure it, they provide thumb screws. So we're going to screw down that one side. Remember, finger tight. It doesn't have to be a super strong grip. We're going to screw down the exact corner opposite of it. Finger tight. We're going to screw down this side. And then we're going to go back through the same pattern to tighten down with our iFixit screwdriver. So now we have mounted our heatsink and our pump and our VRM fan. We have the radiator ready to mount here as well. And then we have this cable right here, which we need to find the CPU fan header. Now let's talk about that for a second. Why am I targeting the CPU fan header? Well, a lot of the times these motherboards are going to be trying to make sure that your CPU fan hasn't died. And so they have a natural protection mechanism, and it uses that specific fan header to make sure that your CPU is running. If you don't have something connected there, the BIOS basically will freak out every time you turn on the system, telling you, hey, warning, your CPU fan has died, warning. Even though you already have a pump and everything is working just fine. So you can turn that warning off or just connect your fan header to that CPU fan header, just like that. Now, we do have extra cable here. When I do cable management, I will figure out a way to basically hide this excess. For now, I'm just going to pull it up and out of the way using the RAM mount to basically just move it a little bit and tuck it behind there. So now we are ready to see. I'm not going to mount this quite yet. I want to make sure that everything is working before I go and do the final here. Okay, you see our fans are rotating here. Pump is rotating down here. We have a certain status indicator there. We have LEDs lit on the motherboard. That tells me that we have a good pump, good fans, and this is working. Yay. So let's go ahead and finish mounting the radiator and fan assembly. I prefer the fans themselves to be blowing through the radiator. I prefer that look. So we're going to keep it just like this. We're going to slide it down. And then along the top here, you're going to see this mesh filter. We're going to take this off because we are using this as an exhaust. And then we have these slots. These slots are where we are going to place this radiator assembly. in order to get everything kind of perfectly aligned in exactly the way that I want. So I'm going to take a look and see where things line up, and then I'll figure out where we're going to mount. Let's get the right depth for the radiator, and I'm going to consult my instruction guide again to make sure I get the right depth. So what their recommendation here, you can see on their website, is this size screw. Focus on the screw, not on me. This size screw, which is pretty standard for a radiator mount. And then they do recommend having the washer as well. I'm just checking to see, yeah. So they have the washer over the case, and then they are pushing the screw through into the radiator. So then that's exactly what we will do. And I'm going to start with this corner right here, because that's going to set the height and the depth for pretty much everything else. So I'm just pulling up a little bit on the assembly, finger tightening that, and then I'm going to give it a slight twist to make sure it stays in place. The next screw I'm going to mount is going to be right here, and that's going to help bite in the front. That'll hold the radiator in position so that I can mount the rest of the screws.
And here we have everything secured to the top of the case. I couldn't end up using the washers because of the little divot that's on the Phanteks case itself, but that's completely okay. It is properly secure. You can see it sits very well. You barely know it's even there. And here is the final result. You can see a very clean package, fans pointing in the correct direction. We do have the little tube coming down, but it's going to actually be a very aesthetically pleasing portion of this case. It is very clean lines because of this liquid cooler right here. Radiator is flush mounted, and we have the cable, which normally it is hard to tuck these away or find a place to hide these, but this instance I was able to hide it right behind the radiator, and we can see that fan that's going to be blowing directly on our VRM solution. So what's next? We're going to talk about those RAM sticks right there.